All right, UFC 315, Della Maddalena versus Muhammad versus Della Maddalena. Full card predictions. Starting from the bottom, going to the top. If the audio quality is a little worse than usual, it's because I'm on my phone in my car. It is also 1 a.m. and I'm at McDonald's, but we're keeping it major. We're doing bottom top, whatever. You get the drill. First fight of the card: Brad Katona versus Bekzat Almakhan. A lot of people have been saying I'm picking Bekzat because he looked good against Umar, and Brad Katona is about just. He did not look good against Umar. Let's get this straight. He did drop Umar in the first round. He won the first round, which is impressive. No one else has dropped Umar in the UFC. I don't think Marab did. Yeah, he didn't. So the only person to drop Umar in the UFC took a round off of him. That's impressive. However, other than that, he got pretty much destroyed. One thing you'll notice about Umar compared to the other Nurmagomedovs and the other people in Team Eagle, Islam, Alyashkab, all those guys. I don't know if you heard that there's a crazy person screaming. It is 1 a.m. like I said. Okay, regardless. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the difference between Umar and the other people in Team Eagle is that he goes for the back and he jumps the back a lot, and he's had some trouble with that in the past. Sometimes when you jump someone's back, you end up on your back. But against Bekzat, we really had no problems doing that. And I think it made Bekzat look like a much worse grappler than a lot of the other people Umar has fought. All of that being said, Brad Katona is a complete bomb. I'm picking Bekzat to win. If you just look what he did on the regional scene, he didn't have the greatest competition in the world, but he actually had pretty decent competition for a Kazakhstani regional fighter. And what he did to that competition, I don't think Brad Katona could do. And when you combine the fact that he has now been in the UFC for over a year, he just fought one of the best fighters in the division, and he's taken a year off to kind of grow into this 135 frame. I think he's going to be much better than Brad Katona is because Brad Katona isn't very good. So yeah, I'm picking Bekzat Almakhan. Next fight up the card: Daniel Santos versus Jung Young Lee. Jung Young Lee is much bigger than Daniel Santos. He's got a bigger frame and he's thicker. And I'm kind of tempted to pick him because I think he's actually a technically pretty good fighter. And that loss to Hyder Mill has aged pretty well. However, he got kind of overwhelmed very easily by Hyder Mill, who we found is a pretty solid technical fighter when he uses technique. And Daniel Santos is a very quick. He's not a 145er. He's got a 135 frame. He's got 135 skill. And I think he's going to be able to use his speed to overwhelm Jung Young Lee, similar to how Hyder Mill did. I don't know if he's going to be able to finish him in the first round. I don't know if he's got Hyder Mill power, but he's definitely a lot faster than Hyder Mill. Maybe he has better cardio. Maybe not. Hyder Mill threw a lot of punches in his last fight and won that. However, I think Daniel Santos is actually pretty solid. I think he's going to get this done. I could see him getting out grappled and losing. I could see, if the fight is slow, him losing. I just think he's technically better and can overwhelm Young Lee with his speed. All right, next fight up the card, we've got Marc-Andre Barriault, how you pronounce it, versus Bruno Silva. Canada's getting the rough end of the stick. This is one fighter on a 3-fight losing streak and one fighter on a 4-fight losing streak. I'm just going to pick Barriault. Bruno Silva hasn't looked very good since his fight with Pereira, and he didn't even look that good in that fight. He got kind of his ass whooped. It was just pretty impressive that he didn't get finished, and obviously he finished Brad Tavares, who's impossible to finish. But other than that, in his last 4, like I just said, he's coming off a 4-fight losing streak, easily submitted by Brendan Allen. Lost to Sharbullet in Sharbullet's debut, who I never thought was that good of a fighter. He exposed his grappling in that fight. He showed that Shara might not be the best grappler in the UFC, and he didn't get finished immediately, like everyone who Shara fought on the regional scene did. But he got pretty easily outstruck. He got a head kicked off the ground. Didn't look that good. Chris Weidman's fight obviously got eye poked 11 times or whatever it was, and maybe shouldn't have lost that fight. But he was getting whooped. Outside of that, he was getting easily out grappled and kind of outboxed at range. And then his last fight against Ismail Nardiev isn't very good. It wasn't a very good fight. I would say he looked better than I thought he might, because I figured he might get completely outstruck. But he didn't look good. He looked like the worst fighter in a shitty kickboxing match. So I'm going to pick Barriault. He hasn't looked very good in his last 3. He went to split decision with Chris Curtis, which isn't terrible. Chris Curtis is going to be a perennial guy outside of the rankings. Who else did he fight? He fought Joe Pyfer. He got knocked down that pretty easily. But in his last fight, I do think he's better than Dustin Stoltzfus. I just think he was dumb to engage with Stoltzfus when he was rocked. And because of that, he got knocked out. Yeah, I'll pick Barriault. I think if this fight is boring, like most of Bruno Silva's fights are, Barriault is better at being a boring guy who's going to get a couple good moments by swinging in with his eyes closed. So I'll pick Barriault to win that way. Next fight up the card, Navajo Stirling versus Ivan Erslan. Ivan Erslan, second fight in the UFC. His last fight was against Jan Cutelaba. He lost by decision. I will say, he didn't look that bad. I mean, he looked pretty bad in that fight because you shouldn't be losing to Jan Cutelaba by decision. However, I think he looked maybe like the better fighter in that fight, and just things didn't go his way. But like I said, you really should not be losing a decision to Jan Cutelaba. Obviously, Navajo Stirling, in his UFC debut, he fought Tuco Tokos, maybe the worst fighter in the UFC, and he didn't finish him. He took him to a decision. Not that impressed with that performance. However, he didn't really look like a bad fighter, having a shitty performance against Tuco Tokos. He looked like a pretty decent fighter, having a bad fight against Tuco Tokos. So I think if anything, he's going to improve for that fight. He's pretty green. That was his 6th professional fight. And a lot of the guys at the CKB camp, you think of Carlos Olberg recently, you think of Adesanya recently. I'm sure someone else from CKB too. But especially those two, the guys in the higher weight classes, they like to, instead of beating their opponent pretty clearly and making it look impressive, they like being slightly better in a boring kickboxing match. And that's kind of what he did against Tuco Tokos. You think of Adesanya against, hasn't really won recently, but other than the Pereira fight, his wins before that, like Cannonier and Yoel Romero and Marvin Vettori and the second Whitaker fight, he just looked a little bit better on the feet. You can argue he looked worse against Whitaker. You think Carlos Olberg in his last 2 against Uzdemir and Blachowicz, he kind of just looked slightly better on the feet and got a decision. And you can argue he could have lost both of those. So I'm going to pick Stirling to maybe do the same against Erslan. Erslan just not a very good, I was going to say good-looking fighter. Maybe that too, but he didn't look very good in his last fight. Wasn't impressed by him. So I'm going to take Navajo Stirling to maybe be improved, maybe not, just either win a boring decision or maybe get a finish early, like he was doing on the regional scene. All right, next fight up the card, Modestas Bukauskas versus Jan Cutelaba. Speaking of Jan Cutelaba, what I was talking about before, you shouldn't be taking Jan Cutelaba to a decision. You shouldn't be losing a decision to him. I think that applies here. I really don't think most fighters should be losing decisions to Jan Cutelaba. He's not got a lot of cardio. He's very explosive in the first round, and he has a couple explosive moments later in the fight. But he's not very technically good. And if you're going to be not getting knocked out by him and not getting taken down and submitted by him, you should be beating him in a technical fight. And I think Modestas Bukauskas has looked improved enough from his first run in the UFC to do so. Obviously he got his knee blown out by Khalil Roundtree, and he got knocked out by Vitor Petrino. But in most of his performance in the UFC, he just looks like the better fighter. I don't really think I've seen him in a fight where he gets a knockout where he was way behind and oh wow, thank God he got that, because he was getting whooped on. Which is kind of how you see a lot of Jan Cutelaba wins. He went to a decision with Zach Palga and won, who's not very good, obviously. Same with Tyson Pedro, not a very good fighter. But I think Tyson Pedro is a similar level technically to Jan Cutelaba. And again, I think Modestas Bukauskas is pretty improved. I know Jan Cutelaba is coming off of 2 wins against the same person, Ibo Aslan and Ivan Erslan. It's like the evil twin and the other evil twin, I guess. I don't know. But his fight before that, it was Felipe Lins. That was at UFC 299, I'm pretty sure. And he lost the decision to Felipe Lins in 2024. I mean, that can't be ignored. Felipe Lins was very old. I think he was 39, maybe even older. And he looked like shit on the feet, and then Jan Cutelaba loses the decision to him and drops the last 2 rounds. So I wasn't very impressed by that performance. I think we'll see a similar thing here. I think Bukauskas is much more technically sound than Felipe Lins. So I think if it goes to a decision, Bukauskas is going to win, and you can't take Jan Cutelaba to get a finish in every fight. All right, next fight up the card: Jessica Andrade versus Jasmine Jasudavicius, or Jasudavicius, however you pronounce it. Picking Jasmine Jasudavicius. She's on a run right now. Pretty big favorite. I don't know if she should be a super big favorite. Not everyone can just take down and hold down Jessica Andrade. Obviously, Mackenzie Dern tried and failed. But speaking of Mackenzie Dern, what was I going to say? I don't even remember. Oh yeah, Tatiana Suarez had pretty good success taking down and finishing Andrade. I don't even know if she took her down, but she submitted her. And Jasmine Jasudavicius has, pretty easily out-grappled everyone she's fought. She just did it to Miro Buena Silva. Out-grappled her and won a decision. Jessica Andrade is a pretty decent fighter, pretty decent takedown defense, but Miro Buena Silva is similar in that she's pretty decent takedown defense, and she's a former 135er, and Jessica Andrade is a former 115er. So I don't think she's going to be able to, do better than Miro Buena Silva. She might have better cardio, but I don't really think that's going to be a huge difference. This fight's at 125. Jasudavicius should have pretty decent cardio. I think she's going to be able to, take down or hold down Andrade to a decision. All right, next fight up the card: Mike Mallott versus Charles Radtke. I don't know why the odds are this close. Mike Mallott, I think, is very obviously a much better fighter than Charles Radtke. I know Charles Radtke is 3-1 in the UFC, but seriously, look at who he beat. The last fight finished Matthew Semelsberger. Welcome to the club. Who hasn't finished Matthew Semelsberger? Gilbert Urbina, one of the worst fighters in the UFC. One of the worst, not worst with a T, but worst with an E. One of the worst welterweight fighters. I think he's a former lightweight. Not the best. And then his first win in the UFC, his debut, was against maybe the GOAT of welterweight. So, Blood Diamond, Mike Mathetha. Just kidding. Mike Mathetha, maybe the worst welterweight since CM Punk. He didn't finish. He didn't finish Blood Diamond, which is kind of crazy. And he didn't look that impressive in that fight. And that was kind of a tit-for-tat kickboxing match. Obviously, he got finished by Carlos Prates, and I'm not going to take that away from him. Carlos Prates, one of the better fighters in the division, probably, a top 3 striker in the division. But you look at Mike Mallott, his performances. I know he had that fight against Neil Magny, and that was in Canada, and that was his last time fighting in Canada, and that was a very bad performance. However, if that fight was a minute, or if he had a minute more cardio, or if the fight was a minute shorter, he's winning that fight pretty easily. It's going to be pretty dominant. And I think if he won that fight, the odds he would be like minus 400 in this fight. This fight wouldn't be made. He'd be fighting someone ranked if he won that fight. And I really don't think the difference in this fight is going to be a minute of cardio. Mike Mallott is, I think, much better on the feet than Charles Radtke. If you look at the fight with Trevin Giles, he beat Trevin Giles in a tit-for-tat kickboxing match just by using outside low kicks and a good jab and a couple good right hands. And no one really does that. Like Carlos Prates, the guy I was just saying is a top 3 striker in the division, was losing a tit-for-tat kickboxing match with Trevin Giles before he finished him. And Carlos Prates easily finished Charles Radtke. So, yeah, Mike Mallott I've actually been pretty impressed with. I don't like him. He's kind of an NPC. I don't hate him. But I think he's going to beat Charles Radtke. Charles Radtke's pretty shit. I don't get why he's like barely a favorite. So, the odds were a lot closer before. I think he was like minus 130, and Charles Radtke was like plus, 160, something like that. Or, I don't know. The odds were a lot closer before. The odds wouldn't be, whatever. Yeah, Mike Mallott's going to win. He's significantly technically better. Charles Radtke's kind of a bum. So, sorry to say it. I know a lot of people like him, and I don't hate him. I thought it was funny when he said that about Australia. But and if he says about Canada, I might like him even more. But I don't think he's going to win. I don't think he's going to get the microphone. And I think Mike Mallott is going to probably get on the mic and say like, "Go Canada, eh?" or something like that. Okay, next fight of the card, main card. We've got Benoit Saint-Denis versus Kyle Prepolec. If you were anything like me a couple days ago, you're like, who's Kyle Prepolec again? That name sounds familiar. He's a kind of a guy who was pretty shit in the UFC, got cut, and people are like, oh, he's 4-1 since he got cut. And then you look at who he fought, and you're like, oh, well, of course he's 4-1. I'd be 4-1 if I fought those guys. I'm picking Benoit Saint-Denis. Looked bad in his last 2. I don't think he ever should have been considered top level after beating Matt Frevola. He looked impressive against Matt Frevola, and he looked good against Poirier in the first round. But when your best one is Matt Frevola and you were fighting a guy who was coming off of, what was he coming off of? Poirier was fighting Justin Gaethje. He's 2 fights removed from a title fight. And I guess, beating Benoit Saint-Denis got him another title fight. Like, I'm not super impressed with that. I don't think he was that level yet. And a guy like Prepolec, and even though Benoit hasn't looked very good in his last two, I guess he did look good against Poirier, but he didn't look good against Moicano. A guy like Prepolec, I think he'll pretty handily beat. I think he might be a little hesitant out there. He doesn't want to get, caught and finished by a guy who's not very good in front of a home crowd as a massive favorite. So I think he'll be pretty hesitant, but I don't know if he's going to get a finish. But I think he's going to, show out, look better on the feet, look better in the grappling. Maybe get a body shot TKO. His body might not be conditioned, Prepolec's, because he took this fight on short notice. He hasn't fought in kind of a while. So if you can get, money on that, that's a good bet, I think. But I think obviously stay away from betting on massive favorites. And I think it's possible that Benoit wins by decision because he might be a little hesitant to lose a fight when he's a massive favorite after coming off of two of the worst performances of his career. All right, next fight of the card, Alexa Grasso versus Natalia Silva. I'm picking Natalia Silva because I think she's actually technically pretty good and good on the feet. Alexa Grasso, I think, has gotten very, very, very overrated because of her fights against Shevchenko, who was also very, very overrated, and we'll talk about that later. Obviously, Grasso found the back of Shevchenko. I guess not. Whatever. She found the back of Shevchenko and got the submission in their first fight. Went to a controversial draw in their second fight, and then lost the third by getting held down, beaten up. If you remember, in the first fight, she was like a plus 700 underdog, and there's a good reason for that. And that's because she's dog shit on the feet. And she has decent jiu-jitsu, but she's very hesitant off her back to do anything. We saw that in the Shevchenko fight, but she was doing that before she fought Shevchenko, where whenever she got on her back, she would throw up really shitty submissions from half guard instead of just getting up or getting her guard back and going for a reversal. And I don't even know if this fight's going to play out on the ground at all. Natalia Silva is way, way better on the feet. Grasso has technical looking boxing, but she's really slow for 115 and has absolutely no power. So if it stays on the feet, she's just going to get kicked to high L and maybe finished, but it's women's MMA, so good idea to bet on the decision here. There's only one problem with Silva I have in this fight, other than maybe being worse on the ground, is that she throws a lot of spinning kicks, and that's just always a horrible idea when you're fighting a decent grappler. You look at what happened to Shevchenko. She threw a spinning back kick. I think Grasso either parried it or just got out of the way of it and just jumped on her back and finished her. And she could totally do that against Natalia Silva, who likes to spin for some reason. But when she does it, it's usually in a better position. Shevchenko just throws a spinning back kick to the body when she's panicking, or a spinning side kick, I guess, to the body. And she does it in their fight when her back was to the cage and then she spun. And if you look at Natalia Silva against Jessica Andrade, she would wait until Andrade's back was against the cage and she was covering up to spin, which I think is a lot less stupid. And it wasn't like she was doing it as panicking. She was looking for a highlight finish. But again, I really don't think you should spin unless you really got a good chance of hurting someone with it, which you never really do at strawweight, or at least it's flyweight. So never mind. But yeah, I think Natalia Silva much better on the feet and probably good enough on the ground to, if she ends up on top, not get finished by Grasso and probably not end up on bottom against the much smaller fighter in Grasso, who it's listed as she's taller. I feel like that can't be true. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like Natalia Silva definitely isn't 5'4". I don't know where they're getting these numbers from. Silva I think is a much better fighter and should win if I'm right about the Shevchenko fight making us overrate Alexa Grasso. All right, next fight of the card. I swear to God, if Jose Aldo loses this fight, I'm not gonna watch the UFC anymore. I know he had a really bad weight cut, and they put the fight at 145. But I also heard Aiemann had a hard time cutting weight. He had some issues. And Jose Aldo always has a bad weight cut, so I'm not super worried. I don't think he's going to get chinned here. I don't want to put this out there, and I'll talk about this at the end of the prediction. But I have just bad vibes about this fight. But if this fight goes as this fight should, Jose Aldo should definitely win. Obviously, he can be held against the cage like Merab did, like Bautista did. I don't know if Aiemann has the ability to do that. I haven't seen him shoot any good takedowns. I haven't seen him hold anyone up against the cage. Obviously, Jose Aldo was able to stuff every takedown from Bautista and every takedown from Merab and every takedown from Volk. So if Aiemann can get him down and hold him down, good on him. I will be pissed. Jose Aldo is probably the best leg kicker and leg kick defender in the UFC, maybe the best takedown defense ever in MMA history. And what can you say about Aiemann Zahabi that we can be like, he's the best ever? He's the best ever at having Fiorot Zahabi as his brother, and maybe that's a difference maker in this fight. But he's super inactive, hasn't looked that good, or hasn't had like a great performance in any of his fights. You can't even be like Aldo's way older, because he's not. He's like a year older. We don't know exactly how old Aldo is, so I don't know why they have his birthday listed. But according to Tapology, Aldo is a year and 3 months older. Not that big of a difference. So I don't really know what Aiemann Zahabi is able to do. No one's really technically outstruck Aldo, other than, I would say, Jan had some moments of technically outstriking him. Holloway had some moments of technically outstriking him, and Volk had some moments of technically outstriking him. And if you didn't notice, I just named probably 3 of the top 5 best technical strikers in UFC history, especially in the lower weight classes. So if Zahabi is able to beat a guy with the best takedown defense in MMA history, at least as far as strikers go, some of the best leg kicks in UFC history, some of the best leg kick defense in UFC history, probably number 1, and has only been outstruck by probably 3 of the top 5 technical strikers in UFC history, then good on him. If he's able to do that, fuck this sport. The odds, Aldo should be like minus 400. I don't understand why the odds are even close at all. If he loses, I'm going to be pissed. I'll say this, and this is what I've got a bad feeling about. I got a bad feeling Aldo's going to get Anderson Silva or Chris Weidman, or he's going to be winning, throw a leg kick, Zahabi checks it, and he snaps his leg in half. I don't know why, but I'm getting these feelings like crazy. Aldo's one of my favorite fighters ever. If that happens, I will stop watching the sport. But I'm getting bad vibes about it. I'm going to pick Aldo, obviously. He's so much better. He's so much more technical. He's not that much older. I don't really see a game plan that Zahabi can use to win other than holding him up against the cage. I don't know if he's good enough to do that. So I'm praying, man. But I think Aldo does it. All right, co-main event. Valentina Shevchenko versus Manon Fiorot. I'm picking Shevchenko. I just talked about how she's overrated. One thing about Fiorot is she looked pretty good against Blanchfield, or she made Blanchfield look terrible, rather. She looked decent against Namajunas, but in the Namajunas fight, she literally took round 3 off when the first 2 rounds were pretty close, and she barely won a decision. And taking round 3 off, going into a 5-round title fight against a similar level striker and a similar level grappler, not a very good look. Obviously, Blanchfield tried to implement grappling into her game plan a lot, and Fiorot was able to stop it pretty easily. But for some reason, I feel like when Shevchenko is going to fight her, Fiorot's going to look like she's never grappled in her whole life, and Shevchenko is just going to end up on top and win like a very, very boring decision. One thing I will point out before I get to the rest of the prediction is that what the fuck is the UFC doing with these main cards? You have Belal Muhammad, Valentina Shevchenko, Jose Aldo, a women's fight, and then Kyle Prepolec in each fight on the main card. This main card is a massive chance for every fight to be very boring. So I don't think this fight's going to be an exception. I think this fight's going to be very boring. I think Shevchenko's the underdog. Jesus. I think she's going to win, and she's going to make it boring. She's not going to look good on the feet, but she's going to land like one spinning back kick or like one body shot, and people are like, oh my god, Shevchenko's the most dominant women's fighter of all time. Is she the GOAT? Is Amanda Nunes not actually the GOAT? Just because Amanda Fiorot hasn't lost in the UFC yet, but she hasn't fought anyone who's able to implement a game plan yet. So, and she arguably lost to Laura Dominiquez. And she had to take round 3 off, and she's going to a 5-round title fight. I don't think she's going to win. So I'm going to pick Shevchenko, even though I think Shevchenko's pretty shit. I just think women's flyweight is pretty shit. Okay, main event time. Belal Muhammad versus Jack Della Maddalena. I'm already 24 minutes in, and I wanted this to be quick. Even though I'm really interested in this fight, I will say this. I would love JDM to win. I really would. He's one of my favorite UFC fighters right now. Probably my favorite fighter that's going to be in a title fight this year, unless, I guess if Pantoja fights again, maybe I like Pantoja more. Probably one of my favorite fighters that's going to be in a title fight this year, and I fucking hate Belal Muhammad. I've hated him since I started watching the sport, since the fucking Luke K fight. I've hated him. And he looked really, I think, way overrated in his last fight. I think he was very boring. He looked like shit. He looked like shit against Burns. Sean Brady, good for him. He beat Sean Brady, which is actually a really good performance. We're super boring against Luke K. He epitomizes this, and this is what I don't like about him, is there's some fighters in the sport who are actual fighters in the good when the fight is a fight. And there's other fighters like Ian Gary, who I crashed out about on Twitter when he won a couple weeks ago, who win the fight when the fight isn't a fight. They're not UFC fighters. And honestly, if I was Dana, this is what I would do. Call them UFC competitors. Say, introducing UFC fighter Jack Della Maddalena and his opponent, UFC competitor Belal Muhammad. Because Belal Muhammad isn't a UFC fighter. He's a UFC competitor. He's best when the fight isn't a fight. It's when it's a competition. And because of that, there's one motto. Conor McGregor, you misspoke. He said, timing beats speed, precision beats power. The correct saying, what is it? Stalling beats speed, decision beats power. That's the saying. So that's what I'm going to go with this fight. Stalling beats speed, precision beats power. I'm going to pick Belal Muhammad by decision to ruin my night. That is all. Thank you for listening. Comment if you agree or disagree. Like the video, share the video. The audio should get better going forward. I'm sorry. It's finals week. I had to record this on my phone at 1 a.m. Too much shit was going on. So, yeah, pardon me. But yeah, like I said, subscribe, like the video, comment on the video, share the video. Go back and watch my previous predictions if you care to do so. Follow my Twitter. It's in the description. That is all. I'm praying that JDM wins. I'm praying that Jose Aldo wins. And hopefully it's a good card beyond that, because I think it's going to be a pretty shitty main card. All right, yeah.